Welcome back to the ChiroFit podcast, your number one podcast for all things fitness, flexible nutrition, and injury rehab. I'm your host, Dr. Yannick Schultz. And today, we're going to talk about rehab and why that's important for anyone who's trying to come back from an injury or who potentially has not done a proper rehab. This is something I see far too often. If I had $1 for every time that somebody said, oh, I tried chiro or physio or rehab, whatever they're saying, 2-3 times and it didn't work. To me, if I had $1, I'd be on a beach somewhere. I'd be living it up on a beach. So this is something that I hear commonly is that, I tried a couple things and it didn't work. The long and short is that rehab takes time. It's a process, it's a journey, and it's not going to happen after 1 or 2 visits. The ball can get rolling from there, but that's not going to solve everything. And you look at professional athletes, how it takes them so long to get back into any sport. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today and what that should look like and maybe what the missing link is for a lot of people. But a lot of times what happens is you manage the pain, even if you went for X amount of sessions, you manage the pain, you didn't solve the problem. And that's oftentimes what goes overlooked is the assessment and figuring out exactly what the problem is and figuring out what the issue is rather than just, I have pain here and I'm going to do whatever thing to try and get rid of that pain. Because getting rid of the pain is really the first phase of any rehab. And in fact, it's probably not even the rehab itself. It is just a pain management protocol. And as a chiropractor myself, this is something I do focus on is let's get the individual out of pain as fast as we can. But after that, we need to move into phase 2, which I would say is a little bit more of the rehab, mobility, stability element, and then building back in the element of strength. And then we can also look at return to sport protocols if we were trying to get back to a specific activity. And at the end of the day, your rehab should have some similarities to the exercise or the movements that you want to do. So yes, these little exercises are helpful, but if at some point it doesn't start to look like what you want to do, it's probably not the right rehab for you. So let's kind of dive into it a little bit more, right? Why people fail in this thing, right? And I see it time and time again is that the diagnosis is probably not really what's happening, right? And so, for example, I always love using the shoulder because it's very complex and most people have had some shoulder pain or issue at some point. If you have shoulder pain and we're just going to work solely where the pain hurts, it's right here. Let's kind of rub in there. Great. That might give you some relief. But if at the end of the day you don't address why that is there, so for example, you have poor external rotation, you can't get into that position, maybe the joint is super unstable, potentially you're sitting forward, right? That could be postural, that could be from repetitive strains, from sports, whatever it might be. If we're not addressing the reason that the front of the shoulder is hurting, and you can loosen up, get massage, do all the things, scrape, do lacrosse ball, foam rolling, massage gun, whatever it is, you can do all of those things, but if you're not addressing the deficits and the reasons that it's there, that's coming back pretty fast. And so it can seem obscure sometimes in my practice as to why am I potentially working on the upper back, the neck, even potentially down to the wrist when you have a shoulder or an elbow injury. And oftentimes it's because we want to look at the whole scope and how all these things connect and why one is leading to the other. And again, once you understand the root cause and you solve the root cause, and for me, I see this a lot in my practice, right? Somebody will come in and say, I had physio or I had chiro or whatever it was originally, kind of felt a bit better, but it just keeps coming back. So if you're the person who gets injured, it goes away, but it just keeps coming back, you likely haven't solved the root cause. And this is where a really good in-depth assessment is going to help you create that plan that will essentially get you from kind of where you are to ultimately where you want to be, which is pain-free movement and doing that with longevity. How do I know this? I probably said it before and probably said it on that first podcast, but I separated both my shoulders when I was in high school. And there was a period of time where I could barely roll myself out of bed because they hurt so much. And I could certainly not lift weights. I remember not being able to do any lateral raises for the longest time. I mean, my chest and shoulders were god awful in terms of aesthetics because I couldn't really train them. I couldn't train chest. I couldn't train shoulders. I did either legs, and probably poorly back then, but I probably did more of that stuff and some back. And I would do this repetitive cycle where shoulder would start to feel better. I'd get right back into pressing because I'm like, I got to catch up. I've been lagging on all these muscles. So I go right back to the things that were probably hurting me, re-injure, recycle, and repeat this over and over. And if you see yourself in that, and I'm sure some of you do, then you need to understand that it is important to really address the root cause of what's going on. And we're going to dive into that again a little bit more as we go along. So the true end thing and why your injury comes back, you never fix the reason that it was there in the first place. And you're probably masking it to some degree with compensation, with other deficits and things that kind of like, your body's smart. Your body is a master compensator. It will figure out a way to accomplish movement, but sometimes at the cost of something else, right? Or it can cause another injury down the line in trying to protect you. All right? And the same thing goes for trigger points. And I believe we've spoke about this in the first episode, but trigger points are put there by the brain, so neurologically, to try and protect you from other things. They shorten the muscle, and they're tender, of course, but they do so to try and stop you from putting yourself in a dangerous position. So oftentimes it is either through compensation or as a protective mechanism. So if you are riddled with knots, trigger points, the likelihood is it's trying to tell you there's something going on. Pain is always a signal to take action. So if you have pain, don't ignore it. The pain is there not necessarily to say, hey, we have damage or something's completely wrong, but to tell you that something's off and you need to address it. But what do we all do? We take a little rest or not. We work around it. Oh, my shoulder hurts. Okay, I won't do some shoulders this week. I'll do other exercises. And then you come back to it the next week and it kind of just pushes it off, right? Or you do a little bit of lacrosse ball. You foam roll for 40 minutes while you're watching TV. Cool. That didn't resolve anything. Foam rolling release is all part of getting things freed up, but once again, it's not solving the issue. So when I'm doing tissue work with somebody, one, it's a little bit more targeted, and we want to make sure that we're improving ranges of motion, that I know what I'm restoring, right? So you can't get up here. So I'm going to figure out the tissues that are blocking that range of motion to get you into a further position. But once we get you there, ultimately we need to stabilize that, because then the body doesn't know what to do with that new range. And so if we're not taking part in that second half of things, which is to properly stabilize everything, then that's when we run into issues. So really the first thing is identifying the issue. And for you guys, there are self-assessments that you can do, right? So how would I self-assess? Well, one, I would identify the tight tissues. That's a great starting point. Will that solve everything? No. I would identify, so the first thing is identify maybe the tight tissues in the area. What feels tight? Assess, right? One pec versus another. Does one feel more tender? Does one feel more tight? Visually, do I see changes in the shoulders? And I'm speaking on the shoulders, but this is every body part. Same thing, all around the shoulder. Am I feeling this? Am I feeling trigger points or anything like that? Muscle tightness. The second would be mobility deficits, right? So is my rotation good, right? And you can take a video of yourself. You can look in the mirror. Sometimes it's hard to see yourself. This is where a second set of eyes, chiropractors, coaches, other people who can kind of identify these things are helpful. But where is that, do I have a deficit? Can I compare both sides and see that one side rotates and the other one doesn't, right? If I'm like this, we now have a gap. So when you have a gap in range of motion, so if I should be able to get back here, but I'm actually in this range, that gap that you have between where you should be and where you are is kind of an injury range. because once you put yourself in that position, maybe the weights take you in that position, maybe a sport puts you in that position, you are more than likely going to run into some sort of irritation of the tissues or an injury because you're putting yourself in a range that your body is not able to do. And so for an example as well, that might lead to something else. So if I'm using the shoulder again as an example, if I can't get back and I have to get back to get into position, maybe it's a tennis serve, I have to get back, I'm going to compensate somewhere else. I might go into the lumbar spine, I might go into the thoracic spine. The neck or the trap might get involved to kind of get me in that position. So therefore, you're causing other issues in long term. So identifying, kind of self-identifying those areas. And then also, I would say the last thing would be kind of that stability or weakness. If you're stronger on one side completely than another, yes, we have dominant sides and those involved, but if you notice in, your pressing movements, your throwing movements, that you're doing things maybe better or stronger on one side and there's a noticeable weakness, and it's also the side that you tend to get irritation, the likelihood is then we're lacking, where we've got tissue tension, we've got lack of range of motion, and we've got lack of stability. Trifecta for a potential, I don't want to say disaster, but for a potential injury. So things to kind of look at and self-assess yourself. So tissue tightness, mobility and range, and then is there stability deficits in that sense as well. So this all comes down to the assessment and pieces that we as practitioners should be really good at. And I will say, unfortunately, I don't think that every practitioner is really good at assessing, and they skip over things. And that's not a knock against anyone. And I think there's always room for all of us to improve. I'm still wanting to learn and understand how I can get better. But to me, that is the fundamental piece of what is good. I think the treatment itself, many people can do it. I think you could probably get your husband or wife to work on some muscles, but if they don't know how to work on them or why to work on them or identify what needs to be done, what benefit is there? And the answer is there isn't. So being able to identify the issues is the critical piece. Analyzing a squat, analyzing a reach, a lunge, a movement, and being able to see, okay, this is what's happening. And for me, when I visually look at something, I want to be able to self-identify the same thing repeatedly in multiple positions. I think a good assessment has multiple ways to look at one thing. So multiple tests, whether it's on the table, side laying, face down, face up, movements, squats, lunges, jumping, maybe it's walking, running, different things. And then, of course, the activities that you want to do, right? Whatever that might be. If it's curling, if it's tennis, multiple inputs for me to say, I keep seeing the same thing and identifying that you have X problem. If we're thinking of the hip, poor internal rotation, lack of stability, something of those sorts. When you lunge, when you squat, right? When we see poor internal rotation on a squat, what we consistently see is somebody is going into the depth of the squat because they don't have internal rotation. Their hip is going to find space, so it will externally rotate to create more space that it doesn't have. So oftentimes what we'll see is the feet try and rotate out and screw into the floor. So for me, that's an identifying piece that, okay, we probably don't have good rotation there. Same thing if you go into a lunge and your knee crashes in. Is that lateral stability? Is that ankle? Or is that telling me that there's probably the hip? But by doing other things, putting you on the table, passively testing, going through these things, I can now identify in multiple ways that it's that same issue. If I just looked at you squatting and I said, oh, that's internal rotation, I might be wrong. 50% of the time I might be right, but I might be wrong. So once I put you on the table and I can put you in different positions, do a couple other tests, now I've got the squat, the lunge, the other movements that we're looking at, the passive and active movements that tell me, yes, you are terrible at internal rotation, and therefore I know that's probably the main thing. Or maybe I get you on the table and I test your internal rotation and it's good. So then I'm like, okay, it's probably not a mobility issue. It's more than likely a stability issue, which is then causing some of those things. So we want to look at multiple inputs of information. This is not something that you necessarily need to know. This is what we as practitioners should be good at. So with that, self-identifying and identifying the issue helps us Fix the actual cause of the issue. That's one of the things. The other issue as to why people really don't go well with rehab, they either give up too soon or they stop when they felt better. How many times has it been for me where an individual is out of pain? That's great. We're happy with that. And then they stop. But the job's not finished. As Kobe Bryant would have said, job's not done. So we need to return to play. We need to rehab and make sure. So there's always kind of multiple phases to this. So even if you get out of pain in 3 visits, the likelihood is there's more to it. There's a reason that pain is there. It didn't just, unless you had something acute happen, the likelihood is there's another reason that that pain is there. And so if you stop too soon, pain isn't always an indicator of being healed. And I say this in our first visit is like, yes, we want to get rid of the pain first, but the pain is not an indicator of necessarily progress, because pain can kind of come and go. Pain can also be present as you are improving other things. So it's not, again, always the best indicator of progress. Very similar to weight loss, where the scale is a good measurement tool, but it's not always the main indicator of progress, because you could be getting leaner, you could be building more muscle and all these things, and the scale isn't changing, but yet there's still progress. So ultimately, it is important to understand that pain is just a signal, and we need to listen to it, but it doesn't always indicate everything. So don't stop too soon when you're out of pain. Make sure that you are fully rehabbed and that you have all the tools necessary to then go on from there to be successful, or else you'll be back in the treatment room much sooner than you would like to. Retraining the movement is the other important element, right? Did you take the time to reestablish the pattern that you need? Again, the likelihood is there are reasons that that's there, and you have either range of motion, mobility deficits, or control issues. So again, even if it's something simple and it's like reaching for a mug for your coffee, and that's where you keep getting pain, if we don't kind of work into retraining that, if we just work on the shoulder, get rid of the pain, okay, cool, then you go to do it again, and eventually it might kind of come back. Whereas if we kind of work on things to get you there, right? So give you exercises, maybe it's banded reaches back and forth, get the scapula moving. Again, it all depends on what the deficit is coming from. Maybe you're really bad at rotating through the thoracic spine. So when you go to reach and you can't rotate here, you have to engage other things, or you have to use the shoulder muscles to get there. Maybe it's just postural. You're sitting far too forward. And if we don't work on getting you back and getting you used to that, and then being able to use your shoulder blade, it can sound very complex, but essentially it just says what I'm saying is find movements to get you back to what you want to do. Just as an athlete would return to sport, right? You look at NBA players, right? They will slowly return to play. They've got non-contact shooting drills, then they're doing stuff that's more sport specific, and then they're getting in there. And even before they do any of the on-court stuff, they're doing all the off-court stuff. And that'll be general strengthening, but also some more sport specific. And weight training can also be kind of sport specific. I think the intent of the movement is what dictates the specificity. So weight training doesn't have to be necessarily separate from your rehab. Weight training can be almost a loaded stretch or a loaded mobility when you think of it. So people are kind of afraid to do the strengthening as rehab, but realistically, strengthening or weight training is rehab. It's resistance. It's what allows us to kind of get back to these things and be able to tolerate more. End of the day, it's about building more resiliency. So treat your rehab like you would treat your training, and approach it the same way. Give it the same value and importance as you would with your workouts, basically. At the end of the day, it's also ensuring that you have the basics that you need, right? And so that's why we always look at progressions and regressions of any movement or exercise to be able to kind of find where you're at, find that starting point. So to kind of recap everything from this episode is that you probably didn't properly rehab. You probably didn't do enough, and that's the hard truth. You kind of took the easy way out. You felt better, and you left it at that. And that may not be your fault. That may be the person who is helping you in these scenarios, and they may have led you astray. And that's not a knock to anyone, but there is a reality there. So it's not always you to blame, but there are times where the rehab is just not at the level that it needs to be. And so you're then kind of escaping something temporarily only for it to come back. So if you see yourself in this and you know that there's a vicious cycle, I urge you to try and find the root cause of what's going on, whether that's identifying it yourself or having a practitioner take a look, or a coach, or whatever it might be. It could also be, if you're working out, looking at the movements that you're doing, your training, right? Even looking at a bench press or something like that, a squat, can give us a lot of information as to where there might be lagging pieces that could eventually lead to an injury. So rehab can also be preventative as much as it, that's more prehab than rehab, but it can also be, in a sense, preventative to ensure that we're not continuously getting injured. So final message, make sure that you identify the root cause of what is going on so that you can truly fix an issue and properly rehab it for good. Thanks for tuning in. Stick around for next episode.